Hello, welcome to a special guest presentation episode thing of the coding train. So this is a special episode. It actually is an archive of a live stream. I'm recording this introduction after that happened because I had a bit of some sound problems during the actual live introduction. You didn't miss anything, trust me. But I'm really excited. I'm always happy when I have a guest with a different voice, different point of view to talk to you about something interesting and meaningful. And so today I'm very pleased to introduce to you Saron Yitbarek. Saron, I met first when I think I was a guest on her amazing podcast called CodeNewbies. Is it CodeNewbies or CodeNewbie? CodeNewbie, sorry, CodeNewbie. So CodeNewbie is, I really recommend the podcast. There's, it's been how many years now? Over 2 years. There's tons of episodes. To go back and listen to them all. The thing that I like the most about it is there are so many different stories of people's journeys through learning to code and discovering to code. And I think if you picture in your head what you think a programmer is, and then you listen to the CodeNewbie podcast, you're going to have a different picture after you listen to a lot of episodes. So I really would recommend that podcast. Saron is also organizing a conference, April 20th. 21, 22 in New York City. It's called Codeland. Oh, it's right behind me. Oh my God, it's right behind me. April 21 and 22. This is the URL. And so there's still tickets available. And so what I asked her to present about, or the idea that she had was, how do you put together a tech talk? You're presenting at a conference, you're presenting at a lunch at work or whatever it might be. What are some ways to think about putting together a tech talk? And I know that I struggle with this all the time and I don't want to pasting slides together. So anyway, I'm talking too much. Enjoy this presentation. There is a small sound glitch during the presentation. It's just about 4 seconds long, but hopefully it won't affect your enjoyment of it. At the end, I answer some questions from the audience. And then if you also have questions, you can ask on Twitter. You can ask Saron or me on Twitter. Check this video's description. And of course, you can ask in the comments below. Okay, thanks. And now I'm going to travel backwards in time for Saron's presentation.
Hi everybody, my name is Saron. I'm super excited to be here. This is my first live stream YouTube thingy. So let's both cross our fingers and hope this works out. So as Dan mentioned today, we're going to talk about your perfect tech talk. And just to give you a little bit of context about me, I'm Saron. I'm the founder of CodeNewbie. We are the most supportive community of programmers and people learning to code. We do a Twitter chat every Wednesday. We have a weekly podcast every Monday. We have a Slack group. I think we've reached 9,000 members so far. We're all over the world. We're really excited to code. And one of the things that I'm super, super pumped about is a conference that we're doing. It's our first conference. And I talk a lot, as the screen says. I do a lot of speaking. I've done keynotes. I've spoken all over the world. And my favorite part about putting this Codeland Conference together is getting to work with other speakers, a lot of first-time speakers, and helping them put their talk together and really craft it. So as I've worked with, I think we have about 30 speakers, I've come up with some really good patterns, some ideas that I think will help you. So that's what we're going to dig into today. So if we think about the different stages of putting a talk together, there are 4 parts. There's the ideas and the brainstorming, there's the content, the structure, and the delivery. We're not going to talk about delivery because that gets... Before we dig into these individual parts, it's super important that we define what a tech talk is. Now you're thinking, Saron, obviously, this is a talk about tech things. Sort of, right? I think the more helpful way to define a tech talk is to talk about what it is not. So what isn't a tech talk? It is not a lecture. Can you remember being in college or being in school and actually enjoying your professor's lecture? Of course you don't. It was boring. You probably skipped a lot of them. It is not a lecture. Do not bore your audience. Number 2, it is not a soapbox. I see this all the time where speakers use the opportunity to have a mic and a stage to rant and vent about the latest JavaScript framework that's pissing them off. Let's not do this. And it is not a blog post. If you think about a blog post, it's a lot of content, it's maybe there's some pictures, maybe there's some videos, but you don't really get to emotionally interact with the blog post. It's a lot of content that is usually very useful, but there's no human element to it. If I watch your talk and I think to myself, I could have just gotten this from reading a post, it's probably not a great tech talk. So what is a tech talk? A tech talk is a performance. You have a stage. You literally have a stage. You have a mic. You have an audience. This is more theater than it is anything else. It should also be informative. That's the tech part of the talk, right? Sharing people your technical knowledge, your maybe some opinions, maybe some expertise if you feel like you have some. And a tech talk is emotional. And this is one of the things that I really learned from watching a lot of other talks and thinking about the ones that stuck with me, that I literally play back over and over again in my head to this day. They're the ones that didn't just tell me information or give me a timeline or throw some tech terms at me. These are the ones that said, wow, I felt this way. I really struggled through this. I was really excited about this. And that emotional connection, optimizing for the fact that you are a real person physically there with your audience, is huge. So now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, let's talk about phase one, the idea. Ideas are super, super hard, and they're even harder if you're a beginner, because you generally think, well, I don't have an original idea. I don't have anything that I feel like I need to share with anyone. And they're hard if you're a first-time speaker, because even if you've been coding for 1,000,000 years and you're the CTO of this and that, you may feel like, well, I still don't have an original idea because it's already been written about, it's already been talked about. And the other thing that makes speaking and idea generation really hard is that a lot of times we assume speakers are experts, and I think that's kind of a problem. We don't want to view speakers as experts, we want to view them as storytellers, and we'll get into stories a little bit later. So when I try to think about the ideas that I want to share and put into a talk, I ask myself a couple questions that really help out. One is, what is something that I'm proud of? What's something that I've done, no matter how small it is or how big it is, that I can look back on and go, yeah, I did that. Next, I think about, what have I learned? Every time I learn something, I usually call my mom and tell her this new tech thing that I solved. She has no idea what I'm saying, but that's okay. She pretends. That's why she's awesome. But what is something that you've learned and you were excited about it enough to share it with a friend, a significant other, a coworker? And the third thing is, what's a project that you've struggled with? The thing that I find so interesting about Tech Talks is we view it as a platform for expertise, but some of the most popular talks are really about failure. One of my favorite talks by, I can't remember his name, I think it's Jacob Kaplan-Moss, I hope that's correct, who helped open source Django, is he did a talk, I think it was something like, I am not a good developer. That was the whole thing. It got thousands of views on YouTube because he spent 20 minutes talking about how much he sucked. So talking about your struggles and your failures can actually be very, very powerful. And if you're a beginner, if you don't feel like you have a lot of expertise, that can be a really great idea source for you. So you may notice that these three things, what you're proud of, what you learned, what you struggled with, have one thing in common. It's about you. Which gets to the real source of this. What is something that only you can tell me about? I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. So, everything we've talked about so far is super theoretical, it's all very high level, and everything is wonderful and easy when it seems, theoretical and we don't have a real example. So we're going to dig into an example. And I really just want to warn you for this part. This is really exciting. So if you're not sitting down, you may want to take a seat for what I'm about to show you. This is the cookie dough ice cream cone. No, it is not cookie dough ice cream. It is just cookie dough. There is a store, I believe it's in New York City, that sells different flavors of cookie dough. It's safe to eat and all that stuff. And you just scoop a whole thing of cookie dough and you put it in a cone and you eat it. That's amazing. This is also known as happiness. That was me. I decided to just call it happiness. And if we look at this awesome video, can I play this video? Oh, I can't play it. It's okay. It's just someone scooping a cookie dough thing. It's fine. And if we look here, we can see that it comes in different flavors. There's even a Nutella flavored cookie dough ice cream cone. It's magical. So you, as a very amazing developer, real problem solver, you hear about this cookie dough ice cream cone and you think to yourself, the world really needs a map. They need a map to find out where are all the places where they can find this cookie dough ice cream cone. So you decide to do a little data visualization project. You decide that you're going to make a really cool map, and you're going to use something called Leaflet, which is a JavaScript library to make interactive maps. And you realize that it's a very simple map because there's only one store and only one data point, but you've never used Leaflet before. You're super excited about your first interactive map, and you want to talk about it. So the idea that we're working with is how to map cookie dough ice cream cones. That's the idea. So now let's look into the content. The problem with that idea is it's really boring. If you think about the technical aspects of it, a map with just one data point is not the most life-changing, exciting technical feat in the world. It's actually very boring. So you might be tempted to look at a couple different angles, a couple different ways that you want to talk about it, because you're still really excited. the first way you might present this topic is you might want to do a collage. You might want to do 3 cool map projects using Leaflet. That's helpful, that's informative, but do you need to give that talk? Can anybody give that talk? Can that be in a blog post? If so, why are you the right person to tell me that story? The next idea you might have is how to use Leaflet to map cookie dough cones. This one's a little bit better because the cookie dough cones part makes it a little more exciting, makes it a little more personal. But at the end of the day, this is really just a tutorial. Now, would you rather have a tutorial in a talk format where you're sitting in an audience, you're sitting in a row, you don't have your laptop out, you can't follow along, you can't pause it, you can't ask questions? Is that really the best way to show how to technically accomplish something? Probably not. That's a great candidate for a YouTube video or a tutorial on a blog post. So let's think about a third angle for this. How I made a map of cookie dough cones. Ooh, that's more interesting, because the part about that is interesting is not the map, it's not even really the cookie dough cones, although if you're me, that is really the only thing that matters. It is the how I made. That's the part that makes it about you. That's the part that makes it about your journey. And that's a story that only you can tell. Right, okay. So we are going to focus on that idea, and we're going to talk about the way we might structure that angle. So let's talk about structure. Now, there are 3 parts to a talk. One is the technical junk, all the tools and the technologies and the buzzwords. There's the story. There's also the lessons learned. Now, one thing I've seen, especially when working with a lot of speakers and going to a ton of tech talks myself, is people really like focusing on the lessons learned. That's a thing that people get really excited about. And the thing is, nobody cares. Nobody cares about your lessons learned. The only person who cares about your lessons learned are you. That's it. Because the lessons learned are the things that you walked away with. They're the results, they're the solutions, those are the wins. But all of those lessons learned without any context doesn't mean anything. And the interesting thing about lessons learned is they end up sounding super generic. The lessons are things like communication is very important. Yeah, duh, right? It might be things like debugging is a skill that takes patience. I think we all know that. It might be read the errors. These are all great lessons, but when you present that as the forefront, you're gonna get a lot of yawns in your audience, and we don't want that. So the second thing as a developer you might be tempted to focus on is the technical part, all of the buzzwords and the jargon and all that. Now, the thing with that is that can be great depending on your audience. If you have a super technical audience, that might be what they're really into. But more than likely, you'll have an audience who isn't quite familiar with your exact set of tools, so you're gonna end up either boring them or they'll get really intimidated and just kind of check out of your talk, and we don't really want that. But really the thing about technical stuff is nobody cares. Again, nobody cares about Leaflet until they know why they're using it, what problem they're trying to solve. The technical stuff only matters in the context of your story. So if we go through these 3 points, we end up with the story. Lessons learned and technical stuff only matter in the context of the story, which brings us to the question, what is a story? Now, this seems like a very obvious question, but based on a lot of answers I've gotten, I'm going to go ahead and say that we need to review this together. Stories are about conflict. I think the easy way to think about stories is, oh, there's a beginning, middle, end. No, screw that. That's not what matters. What matters is there's a problem. I come to you, I say, hi, I'm Saron, I'm doing this thing. I ran into this problem, here's how I fixed it. The moment you can get to, I ran into this problem, your audience will sit up. They'll think, oh crap, how did you do that? Oh my goodness, I've had that problem myself. How would I solve that? It immediately becomes interesting as soon as you introduce that tension. So if we think about these 3 components, this is kind of the order that we want to structure our talk in. We want to start with that story. We want to present that tension, that conflict right off the bat as soon as we can. And then we want to get into the technical part because it is a tech talk. We want to introduce those tools, the terminology, the framework, that kind of thing. And then we want to end with the lesson because the lesson is the resolution. That's how we solve the problem, and that's how we make sure to never have that problem again, crossing our fingers. So this means that you are going to be tempted to have a story section, then a technical section, then a lessons learned section. Now let's think about that. If you structure a 40-minute talk in these sections, you will have spent the first was it 12 and a half? I wish I hadn't done 40. I'll do 45. 45-minute talk. That means you'll have structured the first 15 minutes telling awesome stories, in which case I'm excited. I go, ooh, goody, this is great. And then you'll spend the next 15 minutes talking about all the tech things and throwing a lot of words at me that hopefully I understand. And then you spend the last 15 talking about a list of lessons learned. And if you remember the tech talks you've seen, a lot of the technical section stuff and lessons stuff ends up just in bullet points. And bullet points aren't the most exciting thing to look at for 15 minutes. Instead, what you want to do is you want to take that story and you want to divide it up. Generally, stories work well in groups of 3. I think most things work well in groups of 3. So we're going to divide our story up into 3 parts. Part 1 will have its own story, its own conflict. We'll introduce the technical components, and then we'll share the lessons learned. Part 2, same structure, story, technical stuff, lessons learned. And then part 3, story, technical, lessons learned. And if you think about the structure in this way, the original, the more common definition of a story having a beginning, middle, end up falling right in line. Part 1 is your beginning, part 2 is your middle, part 3 is your end. Now, if you do it this way, you'll have a couple benefits. Number 1 is you have one cohesive story. Those 3 parts, even though they have their own conflict, their own tension, really they're 3 parts of the same journey, the same narrative. And that makes me feel like I'm not being interrupted. It gives me an incentive to keep going. That cohesion is really, really important. The third thing that really works out when you have that 3-story structure is you're introducing a new adventure every, I should have said like 33%, right? 33% of the talk. So you present a problem, and maybe as an audience member I go, oh, I can't really relate to that, I'm not really that interested. That's okay. 33% of the way in, I get a new problem, I get a new tension, I get a new conflict that we're going to talk through. So it gives me an entry point, a ramp, an on-ramp for your talk at 3 specific points, which is very nice. And the third thing is that all of these lessons, instead of stacking them at the end, when you interweave them throughout your whole talk, you have context for that. So this goes back to one of the things that we talked about at the very beginning of this video, which is that your talk is a performance. When you position things as a story, you're optimizing for that performance feel. You can use inflections, you can use gestures, you can bring people up, you can bring people down. You can really be a little more theatrical when you have that content structured as a story. It is still informative. By making sure we have a technical component in each part of our talk, we're able to make sure we're giving people real information, and ideally some next steps and some tools to look up afterwards. And when you structure your talk in this way, you are optimizing for emotion. You're optimizing for the fact that I'm not reading a blog post, I'm not watching a video, I am physically here in front of you and I'm sharing this story with you. The more I can make it about me and my journey, the more able I am to connect with you, and that can be really powerful. And all of this is really just a bunch of building blocks and a bunch of tools to optimize for how people will remember you. Because no one will ever remember what you said. I'm sure a month from now you won't remember most of these points, but hopefully I will have excited you and made you feel like you can do a technical talk. And that's the thing that I want you to remember. People don't remember what you say, they only remember how you made them feel. So the more you can excite them, the more you can bring them on this journey, the more you can make them feel resolved at the end, the more likely they are to remember your talk and hopefully remember you. So these are all the lessons that I wanted to share with you and my own takeaways from putting on Tech Talks. If you are interested in coming to Codeland, would love to have you. It's specifically for people who have less than 2 years of professional coding experience, but hopefully you'll hear some really great stories and talks because we'll be using a lot of these tools to work with our speakers. You can get tickets and learn more at www.codelandconf.com.
Awesome.
That's what I got.
Okay, I don't know if people can hear me now. I'm going to awkwardly come back into the frame.
Should I go over here?
Yeah, you can shuffle it in. I'll shuffle. Wait, I'm going to unmute my microphone. Okay. First of all, thank you so much. What you guys don't realize is Saron is really being great here. There's like a classroom next door. There's like music coming in. I don't think you could hear any of that, but a lot of distractions. So that was really wonderful.
Thank you.
And for me, this is great. Particularly, I was actually just working on some slides for a very short presentation at Codeland, and to be honest, I wasn't really thinking about the story of it that much. It just kind of like, well, this will be interesting to show, and this will be interesting to show.
This is really just all for you.
Yes. So this is very helpful for me personally, which is what it's about. No. So I have a bunch of great. People are saying the weird guy is back. Yes, that's right. I actually don't. I have some great questions from the chat. First of all, there was a really nice comment, since this was a tech talk, in a way, I just wanted to say there was a nice comment that said, I like how Saron's presentation used short, informal sentences and bold sentences, and it makes it sort of feel powerful. So that's something you sort of thought about when you're putting together?
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, the very first talk that I actually did I did all these original cartoons, and I drew them, and I inked them, and I put them up, and it took a ridiculous amount of time. So the next time I did a talk, I did nothing. I put as few slides up with very, very simple colors, and I realized that people actually liked it better when it was simple and punchy and short. So that's definitely something I think a lot about.
Because it's interesting, because I do see a lot of talks sometimes there's no text, and it's all just image, and talking over it, versus, you know, it didn't really occur to me now that it was all text, which I think, you know, is very simple and powerful in that way. So one question from XJerome asks, how often do you get nervous before a talk, and does it get easier now that you've done maybe more than one talk?
That's a great question. I get nervous all the time. I was nervous on my way here. I was like, oh my God, it's my first live something, holy crap. I get super nervous. I think the interesting thing is when I'm a little bit nervous, I actually do better because it's my way of caring and putting a little more thought and love into what I'm doing. So I think being nervous is totally not a bad thing. Some more like practical tips on nerves. Try not to eat a lot before. I usually have like dry toast and maybe some tea and ginger ale, but my stomach and my bowels get a little kind of funny. But yes, I get nervous all the time. I've talked all over the world, and I'm still getting nervous. So yeah, it's not just you, it's all of us.
I'm just nervous whether I'm giving a talk or not.
Just as in existence.
Although I'm more nervous before giving a talk. Actually, during a talk, I don't feel nervous anymore.
That is true.
It's all the sort of anxiety building up to it. Once you're kind of there, and if you can remember that, maybe it'll help a little bit.
Yes, and one quick story that I'll share just to really make you feel better. The first talk that I did, I realized that I was so nervous that I was clenching my butt cheeks to the point where my left one started vibrating. So yes, I get nervous. That's how you.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I will go on to another question. These two of these questions are kind of similar, but let me start with this one, which is, so this is really, since Codeland is a conference for people without a lot of experience in code. CodeNewbie is a podcast that's really accessible and friendly to beginners. What if you are a beginner with little experience? How can you give a tech talk? How can you present yourself with just with being a beginner?
Yes. Yeah, I love that question. One of the things that I've learned is, again, we think of speakers as experts, but if we think about them as storytellers, I think that makes things a lot easier. One of the most one of those popular talks that I give in a ton, I think I've given that talk 15 times, was about reading code. And it was the story of me graduating from a boot camp, just getting my first job and feeling like I didn't really know what I was doing. And so as a tool to help me learn, I got a bunch of friends together for 1 hour every Sunday, and I would read about 100 lines of code. And we'd read it together, and we'd go through it, and we'd have a discussion. And my 20-minute talk was just about that. It was about the process of reading code as a tool for being a better developer. I thought the talk was super boring. To this day, I hate the talk. I think it's like the worst talk ever. But people really liked it, and they liked it not because reading code is a new idea or because I have years of experience, but because I positioned it as, I started in this place, I was a beginner like a lot of you, I really wanted to become better and become an expert. Here are the steps that I took, here are the things that kind of went wrong along the way, and people really enjoyed the journey. So I think if you focus on what is a journey that I've had, right? And stories are about conflict. So what's a problem? What's something you've solved? What's something you're excited about? I think you'll realize that you have a lot more to say than maybe you think you do now.
Great. People are telling me that my mic is rustling a little bit. By the way, this is like a very new day here. I have 2 microphones, and somebody wrote in the chat like, Dan is pretty good at coding tutorials, but not so good at sound management, and I apologize for that. So I'm doing my best here, but now I'm sort of muting my microphone when I'm not talking. We'll see if that helps. Okay, so I have 2 more questions. Sure. One I think is a really interesting question from, and I forgot to say who asked that previous question, which was Tomas Bartninkas, which I'm sure, I apologize for mispronouncing the name. But Ben J. Habert asks, and I think this is, you talk so much about framing the talk as a story and in a way like a personal story.
Yes.
But how do you approach giving a talk if maybe the work that you're presenting is from a company or is it something that's like sort of comes from yourself that's maybe directed by others?
Oh, that's a good one. So I love hearing the company side of things, because I'm always wondering, if you work for a really big tech company, how did you do it? Who did you have to work with? How many people were involved? So even in that context, I think there's still a story. The story might be as simple as, why did you decide to implement that feature? What are some issues you had along the way? Are the salespeople really as bad as everyone thinks they are on your team? What are some of the behind the scenes things that you can share with us that take us, again, on that journey with that conflict on how you did stuff? I love hearing those things. I remember a RailsConf talk that Upworthy did in 2014, and I still remember it. And they talked about how they went, I think it was from a monolith to having a bunch of microservices, I think. And I loved being able to hear how a company that I really enjoy using their website, how they did that, how they broke it up, and the problems they had, and the internal conflicts they had amongst team members, and how they're able to eventually untangle that. We hear that problem and that solution a lot of, how do you go from monolith to microservices? Having someone say, well, this is exactly how I did it, was awesome.
So I'm clicking my microphone in my pocket. Okay, so I have one. I think we're going to wrap it up soon. Certainly, if people, I know there were some more questions posted in the chat. It's hard for me to follow everything, but I'm sure if people have additional questions, you can ask them in the comments once this video is posted, and also you could probably ask and follow Saron on Twitter.
You're more than welcome to. At Saron Yitbarek, first name, last name.
And there'll be a link to that in this video's description as well. So I think this is a good kind of wrap-up question, which I'm going to rephrase it, but it came from Cody Fueller, which is, so I guess the question that I have, I think, is how do you get, like, let's say you want to give tech talks and you want to speak at conferences. How do you get started? How do you find opportunities? Is there like do you apply? Do you network? Do you go to conferences first? Like what is that process?
Sure. So a lot of bigger tech conferences will have a CFP. We had a CFP as well. I think we had about 200 applications for our CFP for like 20 to 30 spots. But a lot of conferences will have CFPs. I highly encourage you to submit to them. It never hurts to. Yes, you will be nervous and terrified when you submit. I literally cried the first time I was typing it up. I hit the submit button and I'm just crying, and my husband's in the kitchen. I'm like, why are you crying? I'm like, because I don't know if I can do it. So it's totally fine. It's an emotional thing. It's cool. That's one way. The other way is meetups. Meetups are a really, really great place to get started. Meetups are almost always looking, like actively looking for speakers to come in and give a short lightning talk, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Lightning talks are a great way to kind of see how you feel, standing in front of people and talking without a huge commitment, without a 20, 40-minute commitment. So I think meetups are a great way to do it. Also, if you're working at a tech company in a tech role, if your company does brown bag lunches, that's a great opportunity to speak. And if they don't do brown bag lunches, you should start one, and you should offer to coordinate them and to give talks in the office as well. Those are some really good places to start.
Great. Okay, thank you everybody. I know this is a bit of a shorter live stream than my usual ranting and raving for like 3.5 hours about some problem that I can't debug, but this is great. I know it's always awkward to like come and do this, like you're talking to a camera and what's going on here, and it's hard to present in these contexts, and this was really great, and I hope that people take something from this. So again, I would really recommend that you subscribe to the CodeNewbies podcast.
Yes,
and check out the Codeland Conference. If you have follow-up questions, you can ask me on Twitter. You can ask Saron on Twitter. That stuff will be in the video's description. And again, if you're watching this live right now and you missed it, just check back, I would say, tomorrow afternoon. By then, hopefully, we'll have, I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn here, but sometime later this week, sometime soon, we'll have an archived version of this video available. And perhaps even with that archived version, I'll edit out this weird part now. I have to like wander behind you and like click a button over here.
Because
there's no other way to say goodbye. Oh, also, I'll be back on Friday. Let me just mention, sorry.
That's okay.
I'll be back on Friday for my usual coding tutorial thingamabob. The one thing that is different, just check back. It'll be on YouTube or on Twitter. I might do the afternoon instead of the morning based on my schedule. So that's what's coming up, and we'll see you later.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.